What kind of neighbor calls the cops over a backyard barbecue? The kind who thrives on control, who sees every laugh, every sizzling burger, as a personal affront. That was HOA Karen, the self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, a woman whose shadow loomed larger than her frame. Her house, a pristine fortress of beige siding and manicured roses, sat across from mine, a modest rancher with a patchy lawn and a grill that had seen better days. I'd moved to this quiet Georgia suburb 2 years ago, hoping for peace after a messy divorce. Instead, I got HOA. She was the HOA president, a title she wore like a crown, her eyes always scanning for infractions to tall grass, unapproved mailboxes, or, in my case, a Saturday barbecue that dared to exist. The air that day was thick with summer heat, the scent of charcoal and ribs drifting through the neighborhood. My friends, Marcus and Lena, lounged in folding chairs, beers in hand, while my daughter, Ellie, chased fireflies as the sun dipped low. It was the kind of evening that felt like a memory you'd hold on to forever, until HOA stormed in. Her flip-flops slapped the pavement as she marched across the street, her voice slicing through the laughter like a knife. "You're in violation," she barked, pointing at the grill as if it were a crime scene. "Open flames are against HOA rules. Shut it down, or I'm calling the authorities." I blinked, half expecting her to laugh, to reveal this was some bizarre joke. But HOA's face was all hard lines. Her lips pursed so tight they could have cracked walnuts. Marcus chuckled, thinking she'd back off, but I saw the glint in her eyes, pure, unyielding spite. I tried reasoning. "HOA, it's just a barbecue. We're not burning the neighborhood down." Her response was a sneer, followed by her phone pressed to her ear, calling the cops like she was reporting a robbery. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers stood in my yard, their presence turning my cozy gathering into a spectacle. Neighbors peeked from windows, and Ellie clung to my side, her eyes wide with confusion. The officers, clearly embarrassed, mumbled something about a noise complaint and ordinance violations before suggesting I douse the grill. I complied, not because I agreed, but because I didn't want Ellie scared. As the flames died, HOA stood smugly on her lawn, arms crossed, victorious. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her audacity burned hotter than the coals she'd forced me to extinguish. This wasn't just about a barbecue, it was about power, about her need to dominate every inch of this street. I'd heard whispers about HOA's reign, fines for kids' chalk drawings, threats over untrimmed hedges, even a rumor she'd tried to ban holiday lights for being too festive. But I'd never been her target until now. Lying in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. HOA had picked the wrong neighbor to bully. The next morning, I dug into the HOA bylaws, a dense packet of rules I'd barely skimmed when I moved in. Page after page of jargon. But one thing stood out: the HOA board, led by HOA, had to follow strict procedures for enforcement. Complaints required written notice, a hearing, and a vote, none of which had happened before she called the cops. She'd overstepped, and I had her. I contacted a lawyer, Sarah, a friend from my old job who specialized in small claims cases. Over coffee, she grinned as I recounted the story. "She's got no leg to stand on," Sarah said, flipping through the bylaws. "This is harassment. Plain and simple. We can sue for emotional distress and push to dissolve the board for abuse of power." The idea felt audacious, almost reckless, but the thought of HOA's smug face falling fueled me. We drafted a complaint, citing her misuse of authority and the public humiliation she'd caused. I also started talking to neighbors, quietly at first, to gauge their feelings. Most were terrified of HOA, but a few, like Marcus, who'd been fined for parking his truck too long in his own driveway, were fed up. We formed a small coalition, meeting in my living room to strategize. Lena, a paralegal, found a clause in the bylaws allowing homeowners to call a special meeting to vote out the board. It required 20 signatures, a tall order in a neighborhood cowed by HOA's wrath. But we hit the pavement, knocking on doors. Some slammed shut, but others cracked open, spilling stories of HOA's tyranny. A single mom fined for her son's skateboard, an elderly couple harassed over their garden gnomes. Each signature felt like a rebellion. By week's end, we had 23. The twist came when I found an unexpected ally. Mrs. Gwen, a quiet widow who lived next to HOA, slipped me a folder one evening. I've been watching her for years, she whispered, her eyes sharp despite her frail frame. Inside were emails HOA had accidentally sent to the neighborhood listserv, revealing she'd been skimming HOA dues for personal expenses. A receipt for a spa day, labeled HOA retreat. A bill for her son's private school, marked community fund. It was a goldmine of corruption, and Mrs. Gwen had kept it secret, waiting for someone to challenge HOA. My heart raced as I handed the folder to Sarah. "This changes everything," she said, her voice low with excitement. We added fraud to the lawsuit, and the special meeting was set for the following month. Word spread, and the neighborhood buzzed with a mix of fear and hope. HOA, sensing the shift, doubled down. She sent letters threatening legal action against troublemakers, her gaze locking onto me whenever I stepped outside. But I wasn't backing down. The meeting was our chance to end her reign, and I could feel the tide turning. The community center was packed, the air thick with tension as neighbors filed in for the special meeting. HOA sat at the front, flanked by her loyal board members, her face a mask of defiance. I stood near the back, Sarah at my side, clutching the folder of evidence. The room hummed with whispers, eyes darting between me and HOA like we were gladiators in an arena. When the meeting began, HOA took the podium, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "This is a witch hunt," she declared, pointing at me. "Troublemakers like him want to destroy our community's standards." A few nodded, but most stayed silent, their faces unreadable. My turn came, and I walked to the front, heart pounding. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. HOA called the police to my home over a barbecue, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. She humiliated my daughter and me, without following a single rule in the bylaws. And that's not all. I held up the folder, watching her eyes widen. "She's been stealing from your dues, your trust." The room erupted in gasps as I read the emails aloud, projecting receipts onto a screen Sarah had set up. Spa days, private school tuition. HOA's face went from red to ashen, her hands gripping the table. She tried to interrupt, shouting about lies and defamation. But the crowd wasn't having it. One neighbor, the single mom, stood and shared her story of unfair fines. Then the elderly couple, their voices trembling but firm, spoke of HOA's relentless harassment. The room turned, a wave of anger crashing over her. When the vote was called, it wasn't even close, 32 to dissolve the board, 8 to keep it. HOA stormed out, her flip-flops echoing in the stunned silence. But the fight wasn't over. The lawsuit went forward, And in court, HOA unraveled. Her defense was a mess of contradictions, claiming she'd misspoken in emails and meant well with the police call. The judge wasn't impressed. We won damages for emotional distress enough to cover Ellie's college fund and a ruling that barred HOA from ever serving on an HOA board again. The neighborhood felt like it could breathe for the first time in years. New bylaws were drafted, transparent and fair, with a board elected by people who actually cared about community, not control. I'd expected to feel triumphant, but as I stood in my backyard weeks later, firing up the grill again, what hit me was gratitude. Marcus and Lena were there, laughing as Ellie ran through the grass, her smile brighter than the fireflies. Mrs. Nguyen joined us, bringing a tray of homemade spring rolls, her quiet strength a reminder of the power in unexpected places. The scent of ribs filled the air, and for once, no one was watching from across the street. HOA's house went up for sale a month later, her reign a fading memory. This wasn't just about winning a fight, it was about reclaiming a home, a community, a sense of belonging. Standing there, surrounded by friends and neighbors, I realized the real victory wasn't the lawsuit or the board's removal. It was this, the freedom to live, to laugh, to grill a damn burger without fear. If someone tries to control your joy, don't just push back, build something better. Fight for what's yours, not with anger, but with the stubborn belief that community can mean more than rules and fines. It can mean fireflies, shared meals, and the kind of evenings that make a house a home. End.